Let's get started. Thanks everyone for introducing yourselves already a bit in the chat, and welcome to our conversation today, Diversity in Focus. Our goal is to focus on some key takeaways and some practical implementations of diversity. So to that end, we really hope that this can be an interactive discussion today, and that we will be taking questions. You can type them in at any time through the chat. My name is Megan Riley. I am an American living in Estonia for the past 10 years or so. I have been in the tech industry for about 25 years, a little bit longer than 25 years, which feels like very long at this point. And for the first many years, I was a tech leader. I was managing large engineering organizations across multiple countries. And for the past several years, I have moved into executive coaching. So my passion is really around creating healthy, large, vibrant organizations that meet the business needs and also the needs of the people. And I'm very passionate about understanding our biases and implementing allyship and diversity at work, both through my clients and also as myself when I was in corporate. So I'm very honored to be here today with our other three guest speakers that I will introduce in just a moment. And also very grateful to Motiver for staging this webinar and in fact their spotlight on Diversity Week, which we have just completed. I think if you can go back through their posts, you'll get some really interesting insights from our speakers today, as well as from Motiver in general. And it's really heartwarming to see more discussion around the diversity topic in Europe at this point. So that being said, I would like now to hand it over to Laura Silmai to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone, and really great to be here today with you. So as we will start with small introductions of ourselves. So I have been for the last 10 years running a relocation company in Estonia a little over 10 years ago. And this has brought me actually mainly to the topic of diversity. So we have been helping close to 200 organizations in Estonia becoming more diverse. I remember when we started talking about international employees and hiring from abroad was something that was kind of very unfamiliar to most of the employers here. So throughout the last 10 years, our team and we have been kind of lucky enough to support and be strategic partners to our clients in them becoming more diverse. And while mainly focusing on kind of relocation and immigration, this is what our company does. My own focus still has been on kind of cultural diversity. So I come from a background of education before coming into the global mobility industry. So throughout all this time, I have been also working with adjustment support and cross-cultural trainings and providing different programs for also international spouses. So kind of going from these very hard solid things of immigration and relocation to supporting with cultural training and actually helping organizations become more cultural differences. This is what is really important to me.
Thank you. Joseph?
Hi, everyone. So I'm originally from Canada, but have been living in Malta for the last 10 years. I was originally a professional photographer for 20 plus years and now entered the consulting field in regards to neurodiversity. In that regards, I come from a lived experience. I was diagnosed at a very young age with visual perception, visual motor, and executive function challenges. And in the last 5 years, had an added diagnosis of being dyslexic. So I have a lot of what is known as co-occurrences. And I've seen within my years as being an entrepreneur and now as a consultant that many businesses don't understand what neurodiversity is and how to support neurodivergence. And many think that they don't even employ neurodivergence, which is really not true. A lot of neurodivergents are quite masking in their jobs, in their professions. Many neurodivergents are actually as well as entrepreneurs. So I've been being bringing this lived experience and bringing this spotlight in this regards to bring a better understanding and awareness and practical strategies on how to be more inclusive to neurodivergent talent and how to better recruit neurodivergent talent as well, because we're leaving a lot of neurodivergents at the door through recruitment practices. And if we get right in the onboarding process correct, then that will be a win-win situation for both the talent as well as the company. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And last but not least, we have Julia Sovane.
Yes, nice to meet you all, and such a pleasure to see so different perspectives on diversity. And I'm so glad that we are very nicely combining all the great opportunities that rely on diversity. So I come with global business perspective. I have been working across different countries and markets for the last 15 years, even more a little bit, since I started my journey from aviation business, where I've been representing company across the world. Now in IT business, where I'm also leading large teams across countries and markets and continents. And I've been always looking for efficient way how to arrange business in such way, a strategy in sales and business communication, that it is very mindful. That's why I call myself mindful global business expert in sales and communication, because I link strategy, sales strategy, communication strategy with cultures. And I love topic on interculturality. I keep on also sharing this knowledge across the business, as well as in universities, doing researches where I really see the great connection, how we can make companies going abroad, expanding, growing their export business with more mindful approach towards other cultural values in the markets, so that they are heard better, they are perceived better, and they are trusted. So my topic for today will be how to build trust with clients abroad. Yeah.
That's great, and I really want to echo. I think it's really wonderful that we have such a diverse perspective on diversity today, because so often we focus on, which, you know, and rightfully so, we focus on gender diversity, especially with regard to pay gap, etc. But today we have really a broader perspective, which I think is really key for a healthy business future. So again, I just want to reiterate to those of you on the webinar that this is, you know, this is us in discussion, but definitely for the benefit of the entire group of people here. So if you do have a question, please go ahead and throw it into the chat, and I will be monitoring those and bring those up for you as well. But maybe to kick it off, I would love to go back to Laura. If you could talk a little bit about the importance of cultural diversity in your experience. What has your experience been? Why does it matter?
Yes, well, besides the first-hand practical experience, having seen so many organizations in Estonia go from their first foreign employee to actually really diverse organizations, there's a lot of studies. There are a lot of studies that show the positive sides of diversity, but also some that focus on the risks of it. And actually, I think this is something that a lot of companies kind of don't really think about that much. Diversity is sometimes seen as something that we have to tick off from a list of to-dos, that we have to address it a little bit. But if we look at global research, we can see that there are actually two different ways that things can go if you have a culturally diverse and in general a diverse organization. So on one hand side, there's a lot of potential on diversity. There are multiple studies that show that diverse organizations might be more profitable compared to industry average. There's also much more innovation and creativity, and also there's a lot of more social awareness, and you can be much more client oriented, because if you have culture add in the organization, not just culture fit, you know, if everyone brings a different perspective to the table, it is most likely that you're going to create much better solutions. And
Birgit, would you mind muting your microphone for us? Thank you.
So on the other hand, there are also potential risks that can come along with diversity if not well managed. So besides these studies that show the great potential in diversity, there are also others that point out that people in diverse organizations might encounter more conflicts coming from these cultural differences if not well managed. You know, you might not understand your colleagues the right way if you come from different management styles. There might be misunderstandings, and this can actually lead to great failures that have a huge kind of numeric value as well. I'm quite sure Julia has a lot of positive and negative stories to share about this. But really the question is, how can the organization make sure that they choose, you know, they go along the positive path, that they are able to get the potential out of this diversity, and how can they make sure that they don't fall into those potential risks and downsides related to diversity. So I think this is the first thing that organizations have to think about and understand, that if I need, you know, I can read that diversity brings a lot of value, but in order for this to happen, I need to take a few steps, and I need to manage diversity in a conscious way. So I think that we need to do. And yeah, later I'm happy to give a few practical things as well. But I think this is where it all should start. And then, of course, you know, there are multiple things that you can do in the organization, from very practical, raising awareness, to making diversity actually your strategy, to make sure that throughout different things you are actually, you know, getting the most in your sales, in your creating new solutions and other things. But I think Julia has a lot of experience in this as well. So yeah, this is why I think diversity is important.
Yeah, this is great. And I love that you called out, you know, these two kind of different paths that we can go, because I think we optimistically talk about the first path quite a lot. You know, it's true that research shows that more diversity can increase profit, it increases employee satisfaction, you know, it opens your market to different areas than you maybe would have thought of before. But I think many companies that struggle to take the first step, Georgia, maybe you could also mute your welcome, and you can also mute your microphone, please. You know, companies that they're afraid to take the first step because they don't know how to incorporate cultural differences into their climate. But let's hand it off to Julia then to follow up on this.
Yeah, very nice continuation of a story why diversity matters. For me, diversity started and became very important topic, or understanding different countries and cultures became very important from the first day when I entered an international company outside my own market. So I had to deal with differences from the very first day, which means decision-making process. It means different approach to leadership, different approach to team management, different approach, how should I present myself and my product. So very practical, very simple, just clearly understood from very first day of my practical business experience that I need to know how should I do it. So when I succeeded with the, let's say, first contracts across India, US, Asia, without any, let's say, theoretical background, I understood that there is something inside of me that helps to get this through. So, and then, yes, scientifically, we can name a lot of nice words, and like emotional intelligence, like empathy, like ability to build trust on different levels. But the key learning from this all for me was that if I, first of all, I'm aware of these differences, the second thing, I accept those differences, and the third thing, that I'm ready to adapt them towards my goal. Yeah, so is it trust building process? Is it decision making process? I know how this knowledge about other values will be adjusted to my specific action. So if I want to get through my business proposal, I want to get through my decision with the leadership, I need to know which let's say cultural values I need to consider of in order to succeed. So very practical, very clear, and very significant from very first day. And yes, I'm in part of the big organizations, corporations, where I see that the more diverse is my team, because I'm leading also global teams, the more innovative are my projects, the more innovative are my solutions to my clients, the more open we are with our opinions, with our strategies, with even making mistakes is like normal, without doing any kind of a panic out of it. Because when different people come with different perspectives, they are ready to test new things, which is way towards growth and innovation. So that's my key, let's say, goal in this life, to be in diverse environment, because I am growing together with the people around me. So is it my team or my company?
Wonderful. Thank you, Julia. And I think that's such a nice segue, because we're talking a lot about, sometimes when it's cultural diversity, it's self-presenting. You see that someone comes from a different region of the world than you do. You see that they maybe have a different religion, they're a different gender, etc. But now I would love to talk to you, Joseph, because a lot of times the neurodiverse people that we would be working with, neurodiversity can be harder. As you said, it's more easily masked in society. So we don't always know, what we're dealing with. So I would love to hear a little bit from you about, why it matters, and what companies, can be on the lookout for or be aware of.
Sure, absolutely. And let's start off by trying to define and give a very good, clear explanation of what neurodiversity is. When we talk about neurodiversity, it applies to everybody. By definition, it is defined as how we all think and perform differently. Now, under that huge definition, there are individuals who are known as the neurodivergent. And the neurodivergent are called neurodivergent because we're diverging away from the neurodiversity. And when we talk about neurodiversity, we're referring to what we call, let's say, the neuromajority. They're one neurotype. And we're talking about multiple different neurotypes. So when we take a look at neurodivergence, who we're really talking about is dyslexics, ADHD, autism, dyscalculia, development coordination conditions, development language conditions, and many other types of neurodivergence. So now that we've got the technical explanation sorted, we need to take a look, based on what Julia and Laura has said, there's a lot of things I agree with, and a lot of things to add upon. When we take a look at the cultural add aspect, or the cultural fit aspect, actually, it's usually the cultural fit versus the cultural add. When we take a look at the culture fit, it's more about the aspect of integration and having individuals fit within the organization based on how the organization sees what their values are. When in reality, when we take a look at cultural add, it's about adding those values and evolving what our cultural fit definition is to embrace more diversities out there. And when we look back at neurodivergence, because that's what we're really talking about when we speak about neurodiversity, we're really talking about neurodivergence. These are individuals who have been masking a lot, where our society has seen them as being written off because of how they think and perform differently. And as a result, it comes down to this now, what Laura had mentioned, conflict. When we don't understand how someone performs and thinks differently, it leads into this huge conflict, where as a result, many neurodivergents find themselves in a lot of conflicting situations with their colleagues or managers, or even finding themselves unemployed. And when we look from the recruitment aspect, based on how, again, they present themselves and how the recruitment process doesn't understand or isn't as inclusive towards neurodivergence during the recruitment process, they would be seen as, again, not being a good fit for the organization. So when we come back to, again, some of the points that has been mentioned, where when we take a look at someone who's dyslexic or autistic and what values they can bring to an organization, we can see that organizations, again, by the more diversified they are, the more we embrace that diversity, those teams outperforms homogeneous teams, those non-diverse teams. So we see a huge aspect of benefit. Now, the other aspect that also comes into play from what Laura and Julia has said and what I'm currently saying is the aspect when I have a lot of conversations with businesses is that, you know, for them, it's looking at the aspect of doing the job. And doing the job is hugely important. With that said, though, if you're not embracing the diversity, then you're impacting the ability that others have in doing the job, which then it really greatly impacts the culture or the outcome of what that company is really looking for.
Yeah, great. I mean, I really love that point. I think, you know, so often it feels like the barrier for entry to even talk about these things is so high because people just don't understand, right? They don't understand does this mean a lot of accommodations? Does this mean, you know, a change in how we make decisions? Does this mean, you know, and really I think at the core of it, what we're saying is, you know, it's good for business. You just have to figure out, you have to have the patience to figure out the way to approach it. Laura, in our discussion, you gave a couple of really good examples in the kind of pre-discussion, a couple of really good examples of how it can go wrong and how it can go right. Would you like to share some?
Sure, and actually, it's very interesting to have Joseph add to this conversation as well from a slightly different angle of diversity. I think when we were talking, one of the things that or that we were kind of discussing is if there's one thing that that everyone in the organization, and not in the organization, but I think everyone should know about cultural diversity is just to kind of understand how it affects, how importantly it affects people's behavior. So I think it's quite easy to realize that if you're interacting with someone, it's their personality that affects how they behave. And then also it's the situation that affects how they behave. You know, at home, you behave one way. Under stress, you behave in another way. At workplace, you're one way. With your friends, you're in a different way. But then very often we forget, now this is a concept that is like the cultural triangle. So actually what Joseph was just recently sharing would kind of add another kind of bubble into this triangle. But when I look at cultural differences, then one thing that is very often forgotten is how culture affects people's behavior. And if we don't think about the culture, that it might be the cultural background that makes someone behave one way or the other, we might very wrongly judge them. And I remember many years ago, this was my early learning about cultural differences. It was way before I became an intercultural trainer, but I remember we had one client who moved to Estonia from a Central African country, and he came for a high position in a we were helping him with the relocation and adjustment, and I noticed how he was finding time during his onboarding weeks for different fun activities, for events that were happening. And I started thinking to myself, I know that onboarding in this organization is very intense. How can it be that he finds these possibilities? You know, is he not taking his work seriously? Because if we look at Estonians, for us, you know, putting work first, really being proud of your work, this is an important value to us. So we had some team events that were happening during the day, and he was happily about to join. And I really remember having these slightly judgmental feelings about him. You know, is he maybe a lazy person? Did he not come here with a serious intention of, you know, building his career? And luckily, during his first weeks here, we had a long drive to the authorities, and we were talking in the car, and we were talking about the values in our, you know, countries. And then I was talking about Estonia and our history, and how we look really much into the future, and how we don't really indulge in moments because, you know, in the olden days as well, you had to work hard during the spring, summer, and fall to survive the long winter. And he said, but Laura, you know, it's totally opposite in where I come from. Our most important value is seize the day, because tomorrow you might not be here. And that's really understandable because of the climate, because of the political and economical situation in his country. And I realized that, okay, it's not him, it's just his culture. And of course, we were able to have this discussion, and he was able to learn about what are the expectations in Estonia to be, that he can continue seizing the day and enjoying the moment in his private life, but maybe at some moments at work he would have to prioritize things a little bit differently. But I think this was a very simple but a very good lesson for me personally, how you can have very opposing values. I can't say that one is right and the other one is wrong. Estonians working really hard and then having a heart attack at 45, that's not a good thing either, right? But you have to understand the environment. And you just, in a wider picture, if you're working in a diverse organization, you always have to keep in mind that there's a personality, there's the situation, but there's also the culture. And as Joseph also says, there's the neurodiversity as well to add to this kind of model. But this is this is something that I think all of us working with culturally diverse teams, we should keep at the back of our head.
Yeah, and I think so much of the work when I'm doing bias training and allyship, this notion of using your privilege to support people whose voices don't usually get heard, right? I think so much of it is really about being curious, right? Being curious about the person that you have in front of you, rather than making this judgment or catching yourself when you do this kind of attribution bias and think, oh, this person is lazy because I'm seeing him in this experience. You just get curious and ask the question. And I think, we all work in diverse environments, even if you work in a company, even if as an Estonian, you work in a company that is entirely Estonian, as Joseph has pointed out, right? I mean, the chances that someone in that company is neurodiverse is quite large, because we all neurodivergent, my apologies, but we all process differently. We all learn differently. There are many ways to be different. And actually, this is a nice, Yulia, I wanted to ask you, because you speak a lot about the importance of cultural intelligence versus emotional intelligence. And so maybe you could explain this in a bit more detail.
Yeah, thanks a lot for pointing this out. So what I have recognized, also working with the clients whom I'm consulting worldwide, is that they always start learning about cultures when they feel they have a state of mind when they need to learn how to accept the others. So that's the key emotional trigger that they find in their behavior, that they need to learn how to accept the others. So that's why emotional intelligence for me became as a base ground for the fact to be ready to change your behavior, and behavior is culture. So this is where this great combination formula comes in. In one of my articles, I was just pointing this out, that you see that one without another is not working that well. It's leadership. Sometimes they think either about ability to be empathical, how to learn to give a feedback, how to be ready to accept differences, but at the same time, no major changes have happened. The only thing that happened, they write a new paper on their corporate, value sheet. They're saying that now we all are open for all the differences. We keep growing with differences, but what we have actually changed, or what is in our practical world is changing. And this is why I point out this to my clients working abroad, and those who want to enter in opposite markets. Let's say Scandinavians want to start business in Eastern Europe, and there are so many questions, why and for what, and why it takes so difficult and hard. And I'm saying, it's not difficult, it's not hard, it's just different, because there are plenty of opportunities in those barriers, in those changes and differences. There are so many opportunities that you might simply lose just because of the fact that you are not ready to act differently. So this is how emotional intelligence plus cultural intelligence are well combined, to my mind. How do you feel about it?
Such a great point. I want to jump in and just remind everyone that if you have questions for our speakers, please feel free to put those in the chat, because we definitely want to make sure that this is interesting and working for you.
The third aspect, again, and a lot of this comes back down to intersectionality and psychological safety. You know, when we talk about intersectionality, we're talking about the aspect, whether it's gender, whether it's race, whether it's religion, or whether it's different economical positions in life, how this all integrates into regards to how individuals or groups of individuals can potentially be discriminated against within an organization or by society. And when we take a look at psychological safety, is it safe to be able to communicate and to express what's going on in regards to their ability to perform in a job or within their personal lives? So this has a hugely great impact in regards to the well-being of employees in an organization. And of course, this again comes down to affecting whether the cultural aspect and or the performance of that individual or groups of individuals, which then brings us to coming down to my last point here. When we take a look at neurodiversity and where companies get things wrong, we tend to think in the aspect that in order to provide them with any type of accommodation, which now comes the myth of cost. And I'll get to the myth in just a second, but let's take a look at the accommodations. The attitude generally is that they have to get a diagnosis first. Without that diagnosis of being ADHD or autism or dyscalculia, we're not going to provide that particular accommodation to them, that adjustment that they need to be able to perform effectively within the job. When in reality, that is a barrier, because without having that diagnosis and not having that, it prevents them in getting that accommodation. And then it comes the aspect in regards to what's the cost of getting that diagnosis, because those are the aspect of those who can afford to get a diagnosis and those who can't afford to get a diagnosis, which then brings in the aspect that we need to go into an accommodations first approach, provide the accommodations immediately, and try to figure out what type of accommodations they actually need to be able to perform more effectively. When you're providing those accommodations, you're relieving any mental health issues that are producing, such as anxiety or what have you, in regards to the fear of not being able to perform in their job. The second aspect of that is that you immediately improve performance because you're providing those accommodations. Now, when we take a look at what the average cost for accommodations is going to be, it can be anywhere from 0 to 500 euros per person. So why 0? So if somebody needs to have more frequent breaks, so that way they can not be burnt out and be able to recenter and refocus, that is a 0 cost to companies, because giving more frequent breaks is not a cost factor. If we take a look at the aspect of providing noise canceling headphones, well, noise canceling headphones can cost anywhere from 200 to 300 euros. So it's, that small cost is really not a great burden to a company. And it actually will improve the performance and the well-being of that employee, and also improve retention of that employee. So those are 4 key aspects in regards to what companies are getting wrong in answers to your question.
Yeah, I think I'm just thinking as you're talking, I mean, I had so many thoughts as you were going, but on this last point, I think what's so interesting now is that both of these examples that you gave about taking frequent breaks and noise canceling headphones are products of a work culture that, requires people to sit at their desk in open office spaces, and work, which we know doesn't work for anyone, actually. So even the accommodations that you're referring to are really just good for health of all employees, no matter what, regardless of their station or their position and their where they are on the range of neurodiversity.
Well, that's the irony.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, that's the irony of the situation, because what you're talking about is a universal design principles. Mm-hmm. And the reality is that what's good for one small group will actually benefit everyone else when you look at the big picture. And a perfect example of that is remote working. You know, if it was 2010 and somebody was a female autistic employee went to their employer and said, listen, I'm autistic, I'm having very hard time performing well in my job, can I work from home? They would have received a lot of backlash and barriers from being able to do that. Yet then came COVID 10 years later, where everybody had to benefit from working from home. And now everybody wants to work from home because they saw the huge benefit that it benefited them. And the irony of that is that for 20 years, the ADHD and autistic community have been arguing and fighting for this right, that now, after it took a pandemic to be able to get that accommodation.
Yeah, and I think this point about intersectionality and how, you know, if you make an improvement for one group, let's say, it actually can impact others, is really something that we see. It's, you know, it's a question of companies thinking more broadly. Laura, we were discussing exactly this, right, with regard to accommodating something like a prayer room, right? Companies often think, oh my God, I'm employing, you know, people, you know, from the Middle East, and now I have to provide a prayer room. Sorry, I'm going to just hand it over to you because you explain it even better than I do.
Yes. Well, yesterday we were talking with Megan about maybe some of the biggest fears that companies have. So unfortunately, very often when it's the first steps of, you know, hiring someone, the fears are so big. And instead of looking at things that actually should be looked at, if I may first say, you know, you were asking from Joseph, what are some of the biggest mistakes that are done? I would say when it comes to cultural difference, it's the same. So organizations are not willing to make this relatively small investment to raise the intercultural awareness in the organization. To actually kind of go along this profitable path. But yes, at least in Estonia, some of the biggest fears, they're very, very stereotypical and very extreme. So, you know, whenever I sit down with an organization who's going to make their first steps in starting to hire from abroad, they right away have questions. So, okay, do I have to create a prayer room? Do I have to start having you know, Ramadan and things that come from, you know, different religious backgrounds? And actually, well, first of all, you should have some rules in the organization, knowing what the boundaries are for everyone, for people from different religions, from different cultural backgrounds. That's important. But actually, you can create these solutions in a way that they're beneficial for everyone. So if you can afford, if your organization has a space, yes, you can create a private space that someone can use as a prayer room, but also you can provide this for the breastfeeding mothers so that they don't have to go and pump milk on the toilet seat. So, you know, and this room can be used for so many different groups, or someone who has, you know, who is neurodivergent, maybe might need this space just to calm down, or you can actually provide one solution that benefits multiple different groups and helps them with their kind of needs. So I think if you look at diversity from
I think we lost you at the end there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. So yes, I think I don't know where I was cut off, but
you were saying if you look at diversity, it was the last word you said.
Yeah,
yes.
The very last sentence.
So I think if you look at diversity from a wider angle or from a bigger picture, you can actually create solutions that provide possibilities to different groups and different kind of people with very different needs.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, you know, so much of it just comes down to, again, like being curious, right? It's not just the diversity, but it's also the equity, making sure that people have a fair arena to play in, and the inclusion, right? And the allyship. And Julia, what, from your perspective then, because you've worked with a lot of different companies all across the world, what is something that companies usually get wrong when they think about investing in diversity that you would like to clear up?
Yeah. The first thing that companies don't do, that they don't pay attention to the differences. That's what we see so far, that they try to standardize things just because it's easier, just because it's much more relevant to their existing model. So what they need to do is to start become more patient towards the process of these changes and possible differences and adaptations that they might need. But when I come in the team and I start coaching them towards these differences, I usually calm them down, saying, this is such a fun to work with different cultures. That's so amazing that you have representative from India, from East, from West in one teams, one in HR, in other in sales. Imagine how great the combination it is for growth. And the first thing I suggest to them, besides the fact that you just mentioned few ideas about physical, safe environment, equipment, and so, I point out the communication environment, how they can trust each other and communicate in a safe manner. That the Indian with their collectivistic mindset, and Scandinavian, Swedish representative can feel with their individualistic approach, can feel safe enough to provide their feedback, to be heard. So how the follow-up calls will be organized, how the management reporting should work, how just the regular catch-ups should be done. So I point out the essence of communication, the very safe understanding of environment where they can interact with each other in a way that everyone is heard, everyone is accepted and felt that there is no difference. The difference shouldn't be the key point of discussion. The key goal will be growth in the company, big goals together going forward, and maybe KPIs. I would put that as a priority, but your diverse perspectives help to bring so much value to reach these goals. So yeah, that's what I try to help companies to avoid talking about differences and pointing out those differences all the time, but looking from the perspective of opportunities again, not the risks, but opportunities that this diverse way of thinking can help them, and start framing them the safe communication channels and styles so that everyone feels comfortable. Yeah, that's what I try to preserve.
Mm-hmm. That's so great. And I think, again, this notion of psychological safety, because I think so often we focus on, when we think about diversity, we think about recruiting numbers. How many people are we bringing in, right? But you have to create a healthy environment for them to stay, right? So actually, I mean, really for any of the three of you, I mean, I'm so curious, what are some good success indicators that organizations are doing it right? I'm not talking about like, percentage of, non-white male, hires. I'm talking about like, what are actual tangible things that organizations can look to say, we are not just hiring, but we're also retaining and creating a safe and healthy environment for people to thrive, no matter who they are and where they're from. Open question to any of you who wants to answer.
One of the things I would say off the bat is, our organizations forming something similar to ERGs, which are employee resource groups. Now, for those of you who don't know what an employee resource group is, these are groups within organizations formed by a minority to provide support to that group of minorities. And when there are ERGs, it's led by minorities for those minorities. And what they do is they act as a cultural support group for those minorities. Two, they can act as a buffer in regards to resolving potential conflict between, whether it's cultural or neurodivergent issues, with management or employers or other colleagues, in creating that better understanding. They organize events not only for that minority, but to also for everybody outside of that ERG group to bring in that better understanding, that awareness and training. And it becomes, frankly, a tool for the organization to shift their organization into embracing that cultural add mentality and that cultural understanding that we've all been talking about. Part of that as well is that when we take a look at more robust ERGs, is that they create a business case for why they should exist and for the business case for the organization for developing better inclusion policies and practices and what the benefits for being, let's say, neurodivergent and having a neurodivergent ERG group within the organization. And that as a result, the leadership uses and leans on the ERGs to help bring in that change, to spot those gaps, to bring in that training and so forth. So that's one aspect.
If I
Yeah,
may...
I think, yeah, sorry, I just on that topic of ERGs, I mean, I think, you know, I worked for many years for Microsoft, which has a pretty healthy number of ERGs. And I mean, another way that companies can leverage the ERGs, apart from, you know, creating this environment where employees feel safe, is also, you know, when you're thinking about, okay, you're designing software, for example, you know, for a particular group of people, you know, then I think, especially for me, that I come from this natural language processing background and this computational linguistics, you know, it was very important for us to engage with people who were neurodivergent to understand how our software was able to be used, or, you know, accommodations or changes that we could make. So I think even from a business case perspective, this ERG, you know, these employee resource groups are so beneficial to organizations on so many levels. I love that you brought that up. Sorry, Laura, go.
No. I actually wanted to move from this quite tangible kind of solution, but still bring parallels. So I really liked, Joseph, when you said that this kind of knowledge should not only remain within the ERG, but actually kind of should spread within the organization so that everyone understands that. And I think this is something where I can also see if companies are doing a good job when kind of looking at this cultural differences, that it should not be only something that is written in, you know, in the corporate policies, and that should not only be in the values, but actually you should really see everyone caring about it, from top management to everyone throughout the what's really good to see is if companies are actually training and educating not only the newcomers who come from abroad, who are the, you know, the foreigners and who need maybe a little bit of support with adjustment, but actually if you raise the awareness and kind of intercultural competence of the entire organization, also for the locals, also within teams that maybe don't have any foreigners within them, or that don't really interact with, you know, entities abroad, but everyone should be more aware. And that's when you see that things are done well, if these kind of attitudes, skills, and the knowledge on those topics are raised throughout the entire organization, and if it's not only in the documents.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. And I think this top down, you know, that it's not just at the lower levels. It's not just at the, you know, at the ERG level. It's really entire organizations that embrace this. What about you, Julia? What do you think would be other good success indicators? You have lots of experience in this space.
Yeah, I think I would make it very simple. Like when I feel that employees in my team are brave enough to express themselves the way they are, it means that we have done a great job in the company. Like everything that you mentioned earlier was taken into consideration. And so each team member feels valued, brave to share who he is, where he comes from. He bravely showing his way of thinking, which is very different probably than to his colleagues and friends. He does not need to be so much, let's say, adaptive manner, so trying to hide his cultural identity. I feel that they express themselves and their identity. They are proud of their identity. This is a great example of how company has, first of all, employed, welcomed the employee, how the processes were organized while he was onboarded, and how team was maybe educated before the newcomer came from different country. So many signals put into one, and lots of efforts were done jointly. It's not only work of one or another team member, it's like joint work with whole organization, within whole organization, so that I can be proudly saying in my team, I come from Latvia and we do communicate like this, or we do solve problems or conflicts like this. What do you feel about it? What do you think about it? And then we can jointly decide what is the best way for us to go forward.
Thank you so much. So we are almost out of time, and no one has been putting any questions in the chat. So I think then I just want to say a huge thank you to our speakers for coming and giving your perspectives. I am going to hand the microphone over to you one more time. With the 3 minutes we have left, just very quickly, if you could name one thing that companies, everyone on the call works somewhere, probably it's a lot of information. What's one thing that everyone can take off this call today and start implementing now? Like what would that be? Joseph, let's start with you because you're on top on my screen.
Sure. When we take a look at providing accommodations first, it doesn't have to be very complicated, and it doesn't have to be from the top down. We have to take a look at it from a scaffolding approach, which means it can happen at the management level of that team. That means providing the awareness and training to that team, to that manager and the team, as well as providing the resources and the accommodations that are required for that manager to be able to hand it out or provide or what have you, to say that this is available to the team. So it doesn't have to be big. It can be really small. It can be grassroots, and it starts at the manager, because it's the manager, frankly, becomes the core of the team, your frontline managers.
This is so great. I love this think local approach. Laura?
To bring just one thing, I would say something relatively wide. So I think organizations should make diversity a part of the strategy. So not just have it happen randomly and hope for the best, but to really consciously deal with it by working with the right attitudes, with the right skills, and with the right knowledge. So yes.
Mm-hmm. Great. Intentional diversity. Fantastic. And last but definitely not least, Julia.
Yeah, and my suggestion is be ready for challenges. Figure out in your team the most, let's say, unknown culture representative in your team, and start building relationships with them. So don't be afraid, don't be shy to ask questions, be direct, and ask them how do they feel in your team, and how you can help them to feel better in your team.
Wonderful. I think if I had one thing to add, it would be exactly that. You just get curious, right? Get curious and get to know the people around you so that they feel they can bring their whole selves to work, and that's a benefit. Thank you so much to our wonderful panelists. Thank you to our wonderful audience. If you have any questions for any of us, I think we can probably all hang out for a couple of minutes on the call. If you need to go, please go, and thanks so much for calling in today. And thank you to Motiver for making this happen. Wonderful.